Doctor Who the Matt Smith years. All my video essays of this era merged into a big bumper video. So grab a cup of tea, your dinner, or whatever you like to consume while listening to my not so dulcet tones as we dive into the world of Moffat. Is Series 5 of Doctor Who the best? It's the first of the Moffat era, an era beloved by some and criticised by others, but time and time again this series seems to place very high in fan rankings. But does it deserve to be there? That's what we're exploring today, alongside why the 11th Doctor works so well this series, why Moffat's lack of restraint harms his own writing, and why one episode beloved by fans and viewers leaves me cold on every rewatch. This is Doctor Who Series 5. Welcome to the fairy tale. The 11th Hour may be one of the most important episodes of the show, definitely at its release. The RTD era had been a mega success and the show was about to go through its first major shake-up since its return in 2005. Not only had the popular 10th Doctor regenerated, but the creative team behind the show's revival had also left, leaving a whole new team of writers, producers and actors to carry the show forward. Leading the charge was the incredibly Scottish Steven Moffat, a massive Doctor Who fan who was no stranger to the show, having written some of the most popular outings during both the 9th and 10th Doctor's tenures. And although this might sound enough to please any worrying fans, there were definitely still some doubters. When a franchise changes hands, there's going to be some worry, not just amongst viewers, but production teams and broadcasters as well. Change is scary. I don't like it when my partner parks in a different spot at Lidl. That's fucking satanic. But change when lots of money and a popular brand is involved is, from what I understand, even scarier than that. The 11th Hour couldn't just be a good episode of Doctor Who, it couldn't just be a good series opener. It had to be a great big bit of proof that the show itself was the star, and no matter who the lead or the creative team was, it would still be a success. Unfortunately, the 11th Hour decided to be so good that it kinda shows up future series and era openers. This episode is so clever, not just in the sense of plot and story and all that, but in its style, its execution, its vibe. This episode has got vibes. It doesn't feel any less confident than what's come before it, and although the main beats of the show are there, TARDIS introduction and stuff, there's a whole new energy to it. It's not afraid that it's new or different, it shows it off, while still making sure it pleases the fans that have been watching since the revival. Now this sounds like I'm a Moffat superfan. I'm not. This is episode 1 of his era and we've got a long way to go. I wouldn't even say I'm in love with this episode. It's not one I would necessarily pop on just to watch, but I admire it so much. As a writer myself and someone who makes short films and theatre, I can't help but be in awe of its craft. To have this much guts and confidence from the off, to be able to establish the tone and feel of the series from the very beginning is not an easy thing to do, and this episode makes it look effortless. I think starting with the Doctor crash landing in young Amelia's garden is just the perfect way to open for a few reasons. Firstly, it creates that fairy tale whimsical tone that will continue throughout the series, and we'll be talking about that a lot in this video. But also, what young kid hasn't dreamt of the Doctor suddenly appearing at their house? It's using that childlike wonder to start its main story, a thing that will continue not just through Series 5, but through Amy Pond's storyline as well. Turning the Doctor into the companion's imaginary friend is basically a way of turning many viewers' childlike innocence and dreams into the story they're about to watch. And the way this opening is filmed helps create that tone even further. The old, slightly rustic house, the overgrown garden, the little burst of light from the TARDIS and the regeneration energy. All of this is used to create that magical feeling. The first 15 minutes of this episode just feels incredibly comforting, which is a perfect feeling to create when establishing change. I think these scenes make a viewer feel almost nostalgic, without pandering to fan wank nonsense and meaningless cameos. Instead it plays on a viewer's childhood memories and dreams and then fears. The introduction of the crack in the wall is masterfully handled. It's that silly little thing that an adult would barely notice, but to a child is the scariest thing in the world. It's very Doctor Who and it works. The first act of this episode is definitely slower than other series openers, but it never feels slow. Instead, it just gently holds a viewer's hand, guiding them through the concept of the series while establishing characters, threat, and the storyline to come. And it's really important that this first act works, otherwise the entire arc of Amy Pond would fall flat. If we don't care about this late night fish fingers and custard encounter, then we would never care that she's been waiting to travel to stars for such a long time. We have to believe these scenes, we have to care for them, and we have to remember them. This isn't a character introduction that can be brief and rely on us coming back to get to know the characters later on. Everything has to be established and developed from the off, and I think Moffat crafts this opening perfectly. And the rest of the episode is very good too, but before we go any further, I think we should look at the new lead of the show. It's fair to say that Matt Smith had a very hard job when coming into the show. David Tennant was ridiculously popular as the Doctor, and the general public adored him as the character. He really was the face of the brand as it reached its peak in popularity. It was his face on the toys, the games, the magazines, the bed covers, all of it. So for Matt Smith to come in, a completely unknown actor to most, and take over the show at only 26 years old, which is only 1 year older than me, and I find that sickening, must have been pretty nerve-wracking. And maybe he was nervous, maybe Matt Smith was shitting through the eye of a very nervous needle. You wouldn't know it though, because he's really good. Matt Smith brings a new energy to the Doctor, and it's there almost immediately. He captures that old man in a young body straight away. I believe he's lived a complicated life. Also, the Doctor's dialogue is quite different to most other main characters on TV, and he delivers it so naturally. I believe his quips just as much as I believe his sadness or fear. They find a really nice balance for his eccentricness for most of the series, allowing him to feel alien without being too stupid or drifting into parody. And I really like how different he is to 10. The 10th Doctor was very confident, a ladies' man who knew he was popular, while the 11th Doctor is a bit more geeky. Still confident, but it's less bravado. He fits this fairy tale tone, this odd man, slightly whimsical, always bizarre, who is as comfortingly familiar as he is an intriguing stranger. Another thing I really like about the writing of the 11th Doctor in this series is his relationship with the Time War. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you will know I really like the introduction of the Time War. It's just a very clever plot to introduce to the show, adding a lovely arc to the central character and allowing us to connect with him as we watch him mourn and grieve. Also, Last of the Time Lords is just a great arc phrase. It's simple, memorable, and boils down the central conflict of our character in one sentence. Trust me, that is not an easy thing to do, and they do it incredibly well. However, you can have too much of a good thing. Keep something around for too long and it's no longer an interesting aspect to the show, but instead a tired trope. When you have a main character whose whole personality revolves around them always moving forward, never looking back, sticking with one story beat for too long not only goes against that core trait, but also against one of the main themes of the show. That's why I like how they deal with it through Series 5. It's mentioned, it's still there, but it hovers in the background. It's no longer a central aspect of the whole story being told. The Beast Below uses it to explore the Doctor's anger and Amy's impulses and intelligence while building on their relationship, but then it quietly goes. It feels like this is a Doctor who has come to terms with what happened, or at least is trying to. It no longer haunts him during every plot. The Last of the Time Lords isn't a title really, but a fact. It allows the series to move on, to keep fresh while still building on what's come before. Amy Pond is the 11th Doctor's first and most important companion. Although he later shares half a season with Clara, the Ponds just feel like 11s. When I think of this era, I think of Matt Smith, Karen Gillan, Arthur Darvill, and sometimes Alex Kingston when she can be bothered to turn up to work. I think Amy Pond has one of the greatest story concepts. A little girl who met the Doctor once and dreamt of him her whole life, angry that his promise of travelling the stars never came true. That's great, what a wonderful place to start a character's journey. Then he comes back and lets her down again, forcing her to wait for another 2 years. When he finally returns, it's the night before her wedding, and finally she gets that trip in the TARDIS she's been waiting for nearly her whole life. The conflict she has wrestling between becoming an adult or living that childhood dream is just an amazing arc to give to a character. There's so many ways you can take that story, and it allows the companion to be complicated and at times perhaps even unlikable. There's a very simple, very real drama about it, giving the show its more down-to-earth dramatic storylines alongside the monsters and mayhem that make Doctor Who what it is. And yet it still feels unique. These character plots aren't as naturalistic as, say, the RTD ones were, this time allowing them to tip into that fantasy angle that the main arc is going for. Amy Pond really is the girl plucked from a fairy tale, a name that could be from an old-fashioned book, and the fact she sells disguise in her nightie, very like Wendy in Peter Pan. She suits the style of the series so well. Thematically, everything this season just gets it, from the characters to the main arc and the Monster of the Week storylines. There's a lot of variety, lots of new and exciting ideas, but its tone is always consistent. I know I go on a lot about tone in these videos, but it's so important because when it is consistent, everything around it just works, as evident in this series. I think the first few episodes do a really good job at establishing the Doctor and Amy's dynamic. In episode 1 we watch as Amy learns to trust the Doctor while coming to terms that her childhood dreams were in fact real, and then in episode 2 the script does a good job at separating the pair, allowing us to see how they both work alone. I always think the quicker you can break up the Doctor and companion, the better. It doesn't have to be every episode, but we need to see them be independent, and it allows both characters to be doing something interesting in the story. Otherwise, you can really easily slip into the companion standing around while the Doctor does something clever, and that's rarely interesting. Victory of the Daleks is a little weaker than the first two outings. It's got some great ideas, and I think that's true for the entire series. Even when things don't work for me, it's usually the execution rather than the concept. The imagination of this series is brilliant. I like the Daleks getting involved in World War II, and the bit when they start turning all the lights on in London is good. I do think this could be played much more threateningly. I think the visual is too good to waste, and I don't think the episode quite achieves the drama of that moment. Also, the Doctor being pally with Winston Churchill never sat right with me. Even if you ignore a lot of his history, which this episode does, their chemistry just doesn't ring true. The banter feels forced and almost too careful. And then of course you've got the new Daleks. The new Dalek design just looks like a pride parade threw up on them. They are ridiculous. They look like props from RuPaul Drag Race rather than the most deadly villains in the universe. Like, I like that they tried to change them up, but this was not the one. Honestly, what designs did they turn down? How nutty were the others? Though, issues aside, there are still some great things in this episode. The scene where the Doctor rages at the Dalek is written and played perfectly. And Amy's quite good in this one. The ending with Fleabag's robotic dad allows us to see her more sensitive, romantic side, which works well for her arc. However, it really is the next story where this series just turns it up a gear. Now, I have no idea if people will agree with me or hate me for this, but I think this two-parter is so nearly perfect. Every good fairy tale needs a bit of darkness, and this story just pulls that magical whimsy away and allows the scarier aspects of the show to have the spotlight. This story was a risk. Blink was a massive success, searing the Weeping Angels into the public consciousness almost overnight. People adored that episode, so basically doing a sequel to it could have been a big mistake. One of the reasons the Weeping Angels were so good in their first appearance is due to how little we knew about them. We knew they were dangerous, and that was kind of it. They really are the fear of the unknown, and as soon as you give the audience too much information, you lose that. So this two-parter had to really earn bringing them back, and I think it does. This story is incredibly busy, it has a lot going on, what with the return of Riversong, all the soldiers, the Weeping Angels, the main story arc, blah 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 blah, and yet it never feels stuffy. Everything is given its moment. This story, definitely the first episode, is brilliantly paced. The new additions to the Angels are enough to make them new and interesting again, but don't take away from what originally made them so iconic. I love the idea that the image of an angel becomes a weeping angel. That's so imaginative and fun, and the fact this story, they're breaking necks, is incredibly dark. I know we don't see anything, but that's still bold for tea time viewing. This story just makes the Angels feel dark and scary still. They lose none of their threat that they had in their first appearance. Instead, Moffat builds on it, adding new layers and tricks without ever indulging too much in their actual backstories or origins. Another character that is reintroduced to this story is Riversong, and again, not one that necessarily needed to return. River could have easily been a one and done character in the Library two-parter, someone we know the Doctor will one day meet again, but something that we as viewers don't get to see. This easily could have happened, and honestly, if Moffat hadn't become showrunner, it probably would have. But Moffat did become showrunner, and in doing so, his love affair with the character was born. It is obvious just from watching the show and reading the scripts that Moffat adores Riversong. He is having so much fun writing for her, too much fun at times. Calm yourself, Steven. Even though I do think River's storyline becomes far too convoluted as it goes along, in Series 5 she's kinda perfect. She's the right balance of being fun, flirty, but also forceful, brave and real. I believe her in this series. Yeah, she's big and exaggerated, but it feels natural to the world that we're in. The rest of the supporting cast are really strong in this story. It looks amazing, the effects and the sets just pop. The storytelling is incredibly effective. The twist when all the statues are actually angels is perfectly revealed, leaving enough time for the audience to work it out, but not being so obvious that it makes all our other characters look fucking thick. Also, the Crack makes another appearance. I think it's fair to say that when this series started, most people would assume that Amy's Crack was just going to be another bad wolf, with it popping up briefly in most episodes before the final. I am very aware I just called it Amy's Crack. It is. It is! Who else's Crack is it? And although there are elements of the bad wolf structure in there, in episode 5 they change up the game. The crack in the wall is no longer a little tease, but instead a massive plot point to the story. It's a very different change of pace for the show as a whole, and I think a welcome one. It's another way establishing a new era, changing how the series arc is structured and executed, and I think they balance it incredibly well. It's not too plot heavy that it suddenly becomes serialized, but it's detailed enough that it builds a richer mystery than what we're used to. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, it's just different styles of storytelling, and I appreciate the change. I like how the Crack is used in the climax of this story, but still letting the mystery of its origins grow. It's good stuff. And then, while the arc is being built upon, so is the character drama, with Amy finally revealing to the Doctor that she ran away the night before her wedding. And this scene is played so subtly, so heartfelt and emotive that it's played like a fucking sex comedy. This is a new segment to the videos that I will be calling Moffat's Lack of Restraint. Now, Moffat is a very good writer. Even if you don't always like his style, you can't deny that the man is incredibly skilled. And I've always had mixed feelings on his work. I think Douglas is Cancelled is really good, definitely the final 2 episodes. I think Sherlock crashed and burned at the end, unfortunately showing that the cracks of the show had been there since the beginning, and I think Coupling just isn't for me. It's dated now, but I can see why people liked it at the time. But he is good, he knows how to create exciting plots and good dialogue. But if there's one thing that constantly holds him back in my opinion, it's the fact he never knows when to stop. Moffat has no restraint. If a joke or a plot beat has made him laugh, or it's a twist that he thinks will shock you silly, you can guarantee it's going to be in that script, even if it doesn't fit. Now there are 2 moments in Flesh and Stone that stand out for me, for all the wrong reasons. The first one is that we see the angels move. Now I know I literally went on about how they keep them unique and never break the fear of the unknown thing, but I lied. They do, just for one scene, and it is so not needed. It doesn't ruin all the work the story's already done, but it does slightly undermine it. It adds nothing. The moving adds no fear. If anything, it takes it away. However, the other one, the biggest lack of restraint, comes at the end of the episode. The final scene, the emotional payoff with very little climax, if you will. This may be one of the only moments where most of the fans and viewers are in agreement. This scene does not work. And even Moffat agrees, stating in an interview that there's a brilliant scene to be written there and I entirely avoided writing it. I played it for laughs and it's so wrong. And he's right, that's the major issue. There is a lovely scene to be had here, a woman who's scared of growing up, who's suddenly shocked that her imaginary friend came back for her and now has to decide what life she wants. That is such an interesting inner conflict to explore, but hiding it through a rushed sex comedy goes against everything that's built up to this scene. It also goes against the entire tone that has been set. There's a whimsical fantasy tone throughout this series. It's magical and feels very much like a fairy tale, and I don't mind breaking that. Breaking expectations can be good, and a tonal shift is a clever way to do it, but not like this. This doesn't subvert expectation, it just confuses an audience. It feels incredibly out of nowhere and unearned, and it's a shame because the scenes should be so good. And it can be funny and silly, that's fine, but it needs heart. It needs to be connected to the style and the themes of the series, and this isn't. This feels like a deleted scene from Coupling, and like Coupling, it feels dated. And although this is definitely the worst offender of the season, it's not the only time where I think Moffat got carried away. In episode 1, the moment where the Doctor is getting changed and Amy refuses to turn away never worked for me. I understand what he's going for, but the joke isn't funny enough to forgive just how shitty this is. And I don't mind shitty characters, I like complicated people in my dramas, but it has to be explored. My issue is that every time Amy does something slightly questionable, it's usually played as a joke. It's not asking the audience to judge or question her actions, it's asking us to laugh and move on, and that feels slightly shallow. It's okay, I know it could be argued that it's part of the arc and it helps the episode Amy's choice, and if this side her stopped here, I'd be fine with it. But it doesn't. It continues. On her wedding day. Not once, but twice Amy makes a pass at the Doctor, first trying to get him to kiss her in front of her and Rory's entire wedding party. And once again, it's played as a joke. And again, this is fine if there are any kind of consequences, but there's not. Amy treats Rory kinda shitty and then the characters just move on from it so the audience is expected to as well. It's these little moments for me that harm the great character stuff that this series is so good at. I just want them to pull away a bit. Not everything has to be a gag or a quippy moment, and I think this series occasionally falls into that. Also, you have River, she's the one who could do the flirty stuff, the innuendos, the making the Doctor squirm. Amy doesn't need to be that person as well. It annoys me because her main arc is so good and her dynamic with the Doctor is so interesting that these little moments just feel so unnecessary. And the final scene of Flesh and Stone barely has much of an impact going forward. Rory should be absolutely fuming, he should be distraught, he should want to kill a man. And it is kind of explored in Vampires of Venice, an episode I really love by the way, and I think people sleep on it, but it is one of the least interesting parts of the episode due to it kind of being pushed aside quite quickly. Amy literally asks him to stop going on about it in the beginning, and he does. I do like the Doctor and Rory's dynamic in this, I like that he doesn't trust him, and the bit where he yells that he makes people dangerous to themselves is great, but it's so short-lived that it doesn't really go anywhere outside of these scenes. I still love the episode though. Vampire fish that actually get a lot of screen time. Hell yeah, that is what I want. Amy's Choice is another good episode. It is slower paced than the ones that have come before it, but it's never boring. I like the tension between the characters and Amy's conflict is realised really nicely throughout. I do think this episode would be stronger if the scene from Flesh and Stone wasn't there. Take away the physical stuff and suddenly everything is based on emotional connections and feelings, and that's just more interesting. But this really should be it. This episode should be the end of any kind of flirtiness or sexual tension between Amy and the Doctor, otherwise its whole purpose is kind of lost. Okay, enough moaning. I've touched on the arc a bit already, so I thought it'd be more fun to delve into what I mean exactly every time I bang on about tone and theme and how this series uses it when building its main storyline. Let's start with tone, because that's a lot easier. When it comes to storytelling, tone basically establishes everything, from the atmosphere and style to the characters and plot. Tone is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful tools a writer can use, as it helps guide an audience through the narrative and ensures that they're feeling all the emotions you want them to feel. If you mess up the tone, you can suddenly derail your whole story, and the audience will view it in a completely different light than you originally intended. For example, a strange man breaks into the garden of an old house while a little girl is home alone. He asks if she wants to run away with him at night. This is the opening of the 11th hour. This could also be the opening of an horrific horror film if you wanted it to be. And that is where tone comes in, and it's why it's so important. Get the tone of this scene wrong and suddenly your family tea time show is getting investigated by Ofcom. And I know I sound like I'm joking, but can you just imagine how this would play if the tone was even slightly off? Instead, Moffat makes sure that everything feels whimsical and magical, from the setting and the dialogue to the comedy and the characters. Amelia wishes for Santa, the Doctor eats fish fingers and custard. She's called Amelia Pond, for Christ's sake. It's as fantasy fairy tale as you can get, and due to this, it feels normal for the story. However, tone isn't just important to individual scenes or episodes, but for a season as a whole. If the rest of the era had this gritty, naturalistic realism to it, the audience would feel cheated. You promised us whimsy and wonder, and you have to deliver on that. It doesn't mean you can't experiment, but there has to be consistency. And Series 5 is consistent. The Star Whale sounds like a fantasy book, the Angel two-parter feels like a grim fairy tale. We have vampires, an episode where dreams themselves are deadly, a painter that sees the world differently to other, and a take on Pandora's box. You have The Girl Who Waited and The Last Centurion. All of this feels like a fairy tale book. It feels childlike but never childish. And it's the same for The Crack in the Wall. If the big bad of this season had been Satan himself, you'd get whiplash. But building your entire narrative around the most simplistic of scares keeps the tone consistent. Theme, on the other hand, is always a little harder to explain and pinpoint, as people take different things away from different pieces of art. And that's good, like if we all viewed something the same, it would be boring. I like to think of the theme as the heart of a story, something that's driving the narrative and the characters forward. It's important, but should always feel natural to what is being told. When writers get too bogged down in theme, you can usually feel the writing. It all becomes a bit too mechanical. Luckily, the themes in Series 5 are broad enough that there's a lot of room to explore. In my opinion, the main themes of Series 5 are growing up, love, and loss, and like any well-plotted season, every episode has one or more of these themes throughout. Sometimes it's a central conflict, other times it's a little subtler, but it is there in either the episode's concept, such as Amy's choice, or in characterful moments, such as Amy crying in Vincent and the Doctor. Even in The Lodger, the theme is strong. Craig is a man who really wants to settle down and balks at the idea of travelling, a lovely contrast to our main Doctor and companion duo. I think this is why the latest two series finals have been poorly received. The theme of the series isn't realised in the end. Season 1 is all about foundlings and abandonment and magical mysteries, all of which barely feature, suddenly battling the god of death when death hadn't been a major theme of the series. It's weird, and most viewers probably wouldn't even notice or pay much attention to it, but it does affect people's enjoyment of a story, because we are all so used to story structure. We have watched a lot of stuff and we have read a lot of stuff that it's kind of naturally part of us. Even The Crack in the Wall captures all three of the Series 5 themes. Growing up and childhood is captured because it's the crack from her childhood bedroom that's now following her and haunting her wherever she goes. And love and loss is captured because it fucking eats Rory. Again, this may feel really simple, but I do think it's why this series works for so many. Its tones, themes, and story are all very neatly combined, that it just allows you as a viewer to immerse yourself into the tale that is being told. Okay, for me, this is the weakest story within the season, however that's not to say it's without its merits. Like I've said already, nearly all the ideas and concept of this series are very strong, however I think this story never gets going and wastes a lot of its potential. Now, I know who wrote this one. I know it's Chibnall, and I know people are either going to want me to hate on him or will be very angry if I do. But I'm not going to do either. I will say that I do not like the way Chibnall writes Doctor Who. It's just not for me. If it's your thing, that's amazing, but for me it leaves me cold nearly every time. But that's not to say he's a bad writer, because he's not. As a theatre nerd, I have read a lot of his plays and they are very good, plus the first series of Broadchurch whipped up a frenzy in the UK which a lot of dramas can only dream of. He's a good writer, just in my opinion, not a good Doctor Who writer. Now I think the ideas in this story are good, but they're just incredibly mishandled. Immediately I struggle with a plot that's about the Silurians being allowed to be part of Earth due to them being here first, ending with them just going back to sleep like nothing happened. It's a conclusion merely designed because they don't want aliens roaming around freely in the Doctor Who world, and that's fine, that would be a big change to suddenly introduce, but then just don't do this story. The issue is the politics and the conflict of this episode are extremely interesting, but it plays it so safe. It's all very surface level and it just makes it feel very pointless. Also, I find the second part of this incredibly boring. The first part is a lot of build up, so Cold Blood really should have been a riot, and it's just not, and I think it's a shame. I think this story could have been great, and it's really wasted. You can't end this with the good guys being like, yes, you should be allowed to be on part of Earth, but we're just not ready yet. We'll come back again soon. Doesn't work, feels weird. The ending, however, with Rory is incredibly good. I just think it's such a shocking ending, and again, very different to what we've come to expect from the show previously. Having such a major death, or fake death, halfway through the season wasn't something we got in the previous era, so it's a great twist. Also, Matt Smith and Karen Gillan fucking nail this scene. They play the emotions so well, it just feels so real and raw, and they kill it. Another episode that I feel is weaker is The Lodger. I just don't really like this one. Again, good concepts, but it's not for me. I just think it's the one where they try too hard with the Doctor. I always hate it when the Doctor is written as quirky in this way, because it just makes the character feel dumb rather than unusual. Like, he's been to Earth many times. He lived here when he looked like Wurzel Gummidge. He knows what football is. He's not thick. He knows he knows David Beck. He fucking knows Posh and Becks. And I know it's a silly thing to get caught up on, but it's just how the whole episode makes me feel. I like the Doctor to feel like an alien because of his differences, because of his presence, not just because he's stupid and naive to basic things. It's just a very simple way of writing it, and I just don't connect to it. But that's me. It leaves me cold. Maybe you love it. Moving on. I have honestly dreaded talking about this one. I've rewritten my notes so many times, and I'm still not happy with them. But here we go. Vincent and the Doctor is an episode that I can take or leave. There, I said it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know this episode is beloved by fans. I know it's seen as one of the most strongest of the season. I know people cry themselves silly, and you know what? I get it. This is by no means a bad episode. I understand the praise it gets. It just doesn't do anything for me. Now, I have never been a massive fan of Richard Curtis's writing, so that probably is a big part of it. He's never been one for subtlety, and his dialogue just doesn't do anything for me. I feel like there's a story here I would love, but the way he decided to tell it isn't my thing. The monster is a metaphor for his mental state, however the metaphor isn't needed because we see his mental state. Most of the episode is dedicated to Vincent's struggles. We don't need the invisible monster to hammer the point home. Again, I know people love it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I want to like this one. I do. I really do. Maybe it's to do with how mental health is portrayed. Now, I love a bit of drama and hard-hitting topics, however, and again, this may just be because I'm not a fan of the writer's style, but there's a tweeness to this story that doesn't ring true. I find it almost a bit too family-friendly, and I think to do this justice, there needs to be a bit more grit than what is actually there. And again, this is all subjective, and I know you're going to tell me in the comments that I'm wrong, and that's fine, I probably am. I just don't get the hype for this one. It's a decent episode, but for me it never goes any further than that. I just find it too sweet, sickly and syrupy almost. It's just not my style of storytelling, and that's basically what it comes down to. I'm sorry. I can't say it anymore. I'm sorry. Okay, before we go on to the final, I want to talk about what I think is one of the most important aspects of the show. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I like me a monster. Monsters get the kids excited, they get my mum excited, I like it when my mum's happy, so I love a monster. I don't think they need to be in every single episode, and I do think you can do a more character-driven drama, however to earn that, the monsters better have been good up to that point. One of the biggest mistakes this show is constantly making at the moment is it's marketing the leads and the impressive visuals over the fun, scary monsters. Kids couldn't give two shits which famous actor is appearing. They want to see a big green monster. I want to see a big green monster. Series 5 gets the monsters right in both the show and the marketing. The trailers put the monsters front and centre most of the time. They use them like the show's USP, and I think that's the way to go. They just have so much fun with the monsters this season. You've got weeping angels and Daleks and a big floating eye and a weird see-through snake thing. You've got vampires and the Dream Lord and evil pensioners with eyes coming out their mouth. Like, it's so much fun, and even in episodes where the monster isn't big, you still get the fun spooks, like the Cyberhead attacking Amy in the final story. It's just a great scene. You can feel that the monsters excited a lot of the writers this season. They wanted to create something good. The monsters, for the most part, have agency in the plot. Take them away and the story is non-existent, and that's how it should be. Never an afterthought, which I think a lot of modern Who falls into at the moment. The Pandorica opens and the Big Bang are the final two episodes of the season. It's all been building to this. I do think they missed the trick not calling one of these episodes Attack of the Crack, but hey, no one's perfect. I really like the Pandorica opens. I think it is paced incredibly well. It doesn't feel like 45 minutes of pure setup. This episode has its own mysteries, its own climax, its own characterful moments and beats, and I think that's really important for part one of a story. This story just has a sense of scale and epicness to it, which I think is great for the Doctor's first final. You want to see them in action and you want the tension and the threat to be at its highest. You want to give the Doctor something to go up against that isn't just the Monster of the Week format that you've been following, and they accomplish this here. It feels grander, stranger than previous weeks, and it's a refreshing note to go out on. Turning the story of Pandora's Box into the Doctor Who sci-fi adventure is a wonderful idea that is executed perfectly, fitting within the tone of the series. I love the use of Stonehenge. Again, it's using British iconography in the same way America uses theirs in Hollywood blockbusters, and that's just fun to see. I really like River in this story. I always thought that my problems with River started as early as Series 5, but they don't. I think here again they find the perfect balance of a mysterious character, but also someone who has more going for them than just their mystery. Also, one of the most impressive things about Part 1 is how they bring back Rory. This easily could have felt cheap, almost undermining the ending of Cold Blood. However, Moffat finds a way to make it intriguing. He's not just back for the sake of it. It doesn't feel like a cop-out because his return is built completely into the main arc that's being told. And trust me, this is such a massive compliment coming from me. I can't stand it when a show or film just brings characters back that they've killed off. I find it so lazy. My partner is currently forcing me to watch Supernatural, and let's just say if she's expecting a proposal anytime soon, she's fucked it for herself. What is that show? What is it? Rory's return is pitched so well because it forces the audience to wait. We have to sit there with his heartbreak as Amy still can't remember him, and it just allows us to connect on a deeper level with Rory. Obviously we've spent a lot less time with him this season than we have Amy, so his emotional scenes really need to hit the mark to make us care, and they do. It's just lovely writing. Another bit of absolute perfection is the cliffhangers of this episode. My god, they build it up so well. The tension just grows and grows. It's almost relentless. River is trapped, Rory shoots Amy, the Doctor is trapped. River blows up, Amy dies, and the Doctor is sealed in his tomb. The tension just rises and rises, and honestly it's down to the edit as well. Just go back and watch that scene and see how perfect every cut is. We hold on everything just long enough to get the emotional hit, but not too long that it feels soppy. And then we zoom out. All the stars go out, the music cuts, and suddenly, as promised in episode 1, silence has fallen. Perfect. That's just good telly. That is good telly. And The Big Bang is another good episode. I don't like it as much as the first part, but that's just personal preference. I just find this one slightly less gripping. The emotional beats of the story work, but the actual plot and all the timey stuff doesn't hold my attention as much as part 1 did. I do like how Moffat resolves cliffhangers a lot of the time. I love that he makes us wait a bit, starting somewhere completely unexpected. It gives the episode its own unique feel rather than just a continuation, and I think that's fun. It brings a good energy to the story. I don't think it works every time he does it, but here it's brilliant. And once again, the tone of the series is there from the start, with stars no longer being real. That is so consistent. This series is so tonally consistent. I think perhaps one of the reasons this episode doesn't grab me is because the threat and the tension doesn't feel as interesting as part 1. I know it's end of the universe stuff, like you can't really get much bigger than that, but it doesn't feel as daunting almost as the smaller, more foreboding prison box that is the Pandorica. It still has some magical moments though. I adore the scene when Amy learns that Rory protected her for 2,000 years. It's so simple and yet so romantic. It's Doctor Who sci-fi meets pure unapologetic romance, and it just hits all the right notes. It's beautiful and yet it doesn't feel twee, it doesn't feel overly soppy. It's just written incredibly earnestly, and that's why it works. It's also given just the right amount of screen time, enough for the audience's heart to swell before throwing us back into the action. I'll be honest, this could have gone different, but Moffat showed some restraint. The Doctor revisiting the past, saying his goodbyes is lovely. The scene from Flesh and Stone actually being from this episode is so clever. Like, I was a kid when this aired and it just blew my mind. It is simple time travel storytelling that makes perfect sense, doesn't confuse any audience members, and is just incredibly impactful. And then the final speech at Amelia's bedside is just beautifully pitched. I think this series is really good at showing us Matt Smith's range. He gets to play a lot of different emotions, and he just makes such a well-rounded, interesting character. He's complicated, almost contradictory at times, so then to give him this really quiet, really small scene that just allows him to bring all those subtleties to the surface is just a wonderful decision. The Something Borrowed Something Blue bit always makes me laugh because you just know how fucking proud of himself Moffat was when he wrote that. You can almost feel him beaming with pride as it plays. He loves himself for it, and you know what? Fair play. And then the season ends exactly how it should and fits the tone of the entire 13 episode run. This had to end on a happy note. We needed that they lived happily ever after moment. If a sudden shocking thing happened just before the credits in an attempt to lead us into the Christmas special, it would ruin all the work that came before it. Sometimes happy endings are just as great as a twist or a shock. So, back to the original question. Is Series 5 the best series of Doctor Who? Well, if you think it is, then yeah. Personally, it's not my all-time favourite, but I can easily see why it might be yours. It's very consistent, the character work is great, and the episodes are exciting, with a new energy pulsing through them. There's a few missteps along the way, but nothing that taints the entire story that's being told. Also remember, it's a new creative team, they're finding their feet, and to be honest, they find them pretty quickly. There's a few episodes I wish I liked more, such as Vincent and the Doctor. Again, I'm so sorry, but it's just not for me. The Lodger is annoying at times, but nowhere near as insufferable as some episodes that come later in the era. The performances are all strong, the writing is detailed and yet still fun and whimsical, and it looks great. Honestly, the directing and cinematography in this series is fantastic. So yeah, if it's your favourite series of the show, you've picked a good one. It's not mine, but it's up there, probably in the top 4 or 5 at least, so that's good. Doctor Who Series 6 is an odd one. I think it's the most Moffat-y series of the Moffat era, and for that reason it's why some people adore it, while it leaves others kinda cold. Personally, I think it has some of Moffat's greatest quirks, but also some of his worst habits. Plus, it breaks one of my main rules in writing. This is Doctor Who Series 6. The good, the bad, and the Moffat. Right, I'll be honest, I'm annoyed at myself. I usually add the Christmas specials to the following season because I follow the script numbers rather than the year. However, I wish I did Christmas Carol in my Series 5 video because it feels like the perfect end to that fairy tale atmosphere. Also, I have a confession to make. I used to hate this episode. I also used to be an idiot. I was 10 when this first aired, and looking back I think I was just a bit too young to really appreciate its story. I was used to those big show-off Christmas specials from the RTD era, and this isn't that. It's pretty grand, it looks expensive, but story-wise it's a little more characterful than something like The Runaway Bride, for example. And for some reason, I just stuck with that opinion for years and years without rewatching it. However, last year during a watch-through, I watched it for the first time since Christmas 2010, and I fell in love. This episode is so romantic. It is the perfect Christmas vibe, mixing the traditional story beats of festive tales with that Doctor Who flair. The performances are all top notch, the music is so pretty, just the look of the episode is magical, and I just adored it. I adored it. I love how it takes A Christmas Carol and makes it this sci-fi romance with a moral question at the heart of it. Is what the Doctor's doing fair? Is he going too far? Does he break his own rules? I love that the episode doesn't talk down to you either. You as the viewer can make your own judgment on his actions, and that's lovely. And I wonder if I was just tired the first time I watched this, because I can imagine a lot of kids enjoying it too. It's got a big shark. I fucking love the big shark. It's funny, I think most of the jokes land. It's incredibly well crafted without ever becoming too confusing. It simplifies its sci-fi elements so the whole family can enjoy it, but again doesn't treat you like an idiot. It is without a doubt the best Christmas special Moffat has ever written, and maybe the best Christmas special of the show. God, that's a bit of praise, isn't it? I've gone all soppy. Right, on to Series 6. Steven Moffat is an ideas kind of guy. He loves an idea. He loves a shocking concept or crazy storyline to get you nibbling at the skin around your thumbs. And I admire how gutsy he can be. He takes big swings, and although they don't always work for me, I appreciate the effort to make what is essentially a silly tea time show feel grand and epic. I like this two-parter. I also dislike it. I love a lot of the elements and actually enjoy the majority of the story. I think the silents are great. I think this is the only time they're great in the show. I don't think they ever utilise these guys. It's like the show doesn't quite know what to do with them, so I'm glad they at least have a good presence in this one. I've seen some people say that the resolution of the story kind of harms the returnability of the silents, but I don't think I agree. We know that the kill us all on sight thing happened in the 60s, so just have their appearances be in the past. I think it'd be quite cool to have a villain that's only in historical episodes. It would also mean you could go quite gothic with it, which I think these monsters and the show as a whole is crying out for. Give me gothic horror, please, please. I like the setting. I know I've banged on before about how I like it when the show uses British iconography, but the American setting works, especially for a more epic story, if you want to call it that. Also, the show was gaining a bigger audience in America at this point, so it makes sense to play into that. The scenes in the orphanage are just a great bit of horror. The visual of the astronaut rising from the lake is brilliant. It's so simple and weird and yet slightly off. I think it's a really cool shot. There's some lovely dialogue throughout. The scene where River talks to Rory about the Doctor is beautifully done. The reintroduction to the main characters is really nice. I do think there's a slight inconsistency with the character arc overall. I find it incredibly odd that we never see Amy's parents again. That's not necessarily something missing from this episode, but it's something that's missing from this season and the era as a whole. I don't mind if they're not going to play an important part of the story, that's fine. Russell used a lot of family storylines. However, they were quite important. They're literally a massive twist/resolution to Series 5. It's a major thing. Amy forgets her own parents and then they never turn up again. Does she forget them again? Call your fucking mum, Amy! But whatever, that's not a negative to this two-parter. So what are the negatives? First, a small one, and I think most of you watching this will think this is stupid, but I don't really like a two-part opener to a series. I want to be chucked into the show from the off, and there's something that ruins the epicness for me when we get credits halfway through the opening story. I also just think it makes the feel of the series odd, going from an epic scale two-part start to a pretty tame regular affair like The Curse of the Black Spot, and that probably makes me judge that story harsher than I would, though it is still pretty boring. I'd rather just have a longer episode for the opening, even if that means we go down to 12 episodes rather than 13. I know it's an odd thing, it doesn't really matter, but it upsets me. Another little nitpick, but it always winds me up, is the line "you fell from the sky." This is the whole Rory thinks Amy's in love with the Doctor's stuff, and then we get the line "it's just a figure of speech," and it's like, piss off, that's nonsense. Yes, it's a figure of speech, but it doesn't work here because Rory didn't fall from the sky at all. We literally see a whole montage later in this series that shows us Rory was always there. He's the one constant of her entire life. There's so much going on in this episode already that this bit of character drama just feels incredibly forced, especially when all of this should have ended after Amy's choice. However, my main problem is with the series arc as a whole. I don't like the Doctor's going to die storylines. I don't mind it for regeneration. Make regeneration feel like death. Fine, that ups the stakes because we know that one day the Doctor will regenerate. But we know the Doctor isn't going to die. It does nothing for me, it holds no tension because although I don't know the exact resolution, I know what it will entail. I know the Doctor won't die, and okay, I don't mind the Doctor's going to die for one episode, fine, whatever, but a whole series arc? I'm not watching the series with bated breath, worrying what's going to happen. I'm instead just thinking about what clever, probably convoluted way they're going to resolve it. And we'll get to the resolution later. This is the whole ideas thing I was talking about. He loves an idea, and I respect the ballsiness of it, but it just doesn't hook me. And Moffat is obsessed with this storyline as well. Series 7 has the Doctor's going to die, Series 9, he also loves a prophecy, an event that was always meant to happen, and yet we kinda know it won't because otherwise the show would end. I'd rather something smaller in scale but with more threat and unpredictability than a wild storyline that has no uncertainty. Also, this isn't a negative at all, but I find it so funny that Russell is known as the guy who made Doctor Who a soap when this whole series is full of nutty family reveals. You could put the EastEnders Duffs at the bit where Amy says she's pregnant.
Doctor, I'm pregnant.
The Curse of the Black Spot is an episode of television that exists. It's fine, it's alright, it's nowhere near as cool as it should be. Pirates should be cooler, mermaids and sirens should be cooler. The promise of this episode just isn't met in my opinion. Also, I just think it's a huge mistake making the siren an AI nurse trying to do the right thing. Like, no, let sirens be sirens. I want sexy scary fish women. Like Vampires in Venice, we should get a sexy scary fish woman once a series in the 11th Doctor's era. That would be a fucking hilarious trilogy. Also, I just wish it was Amy who got the spot rather than Rory, just to change it up a bit. I know it's a running joke that Rory dies all the time, but I just think it gets a bit old quite quickly. Okay, so I now want to talk about the Doctor's wife, however I won't be able to do so without talking about the writing, which obviously now feels very off. Obviously a lot of horrific things have come out about the credited writer of the episode. I don't know what bits he wrote, I know Moffat did a lot of rewrites on this one, but that's kind of beside the point. So while I'm talking about it, please don't think I'm being ignorant or flippant regarding the news that broke. Instead, I just want to try and separate the hard work from the rest of the creative team who deserved the praise from one man who never deserved the career he was given. I think The Doctor's Wife is a good episode. I don't adore it like some fans do, but I do really enjoy its atmosphere. It's got a bit of that grim fairy tale vibe that Series 5 had, and I think the 11th Doctor just suits that. The performances are incredibly good. I think Saran Jones is fantastic. The writing of Idris sometimes tries too hard. It's a little too quirky for my liking at points, but she plays it brilliantly. Same with Smith. Again, it's the script. When he's a little calmer and a little more stoic, it really grabs me. As soon as they lean too far into that eccentricness, I get annoyed because he's already bringing that in his performance. You don't need to force it. Also, I hate all the sexy stuff. I find that cringy. The ending is also lovely, both in terms of the writing and the performances. It's quite dramatic, but somehow it earns it, again brought together by the two wonderful actors. I also like the horror elements in this one. All the stuff with Rory growing older in the TARDIS is great, and I am certain Moffat wrote the bit of exposition about the bubble outside of the bubble. That sounds like a Moffat line, and it's a great way to do it. The thing is like this thing. Done. Simple. Afterwards we have the Flesh two-parter. It's alright, I don't hate it like some people do, but it's not very good. It's another one where I feel like the ideas and the concepts are much stronger than the execution, because I love all the themes and the uncertainty it puts on the viewer, and I wish they played on this more, us not always knowing who is who. I actually wonder if it would have been a better Torchwood episode, allowing them to go darker with it. It feels like the episode wants to be darker and scarier and more morally questionable, but it's held back by its tea time slot. Though it would mean we'd get a lot of cum jokes, at least 9, and that's too many. That's bordering on filth. My issue with all these episodes since the two-parter is that they feel somewhat unfocused. With such a major series arc, definitely the most overarching plot since the revival, these episodes suddenly don't feel like a Monster of the Week format and instead feel a little bit more like filler. And I don't mind that. Like I said, I like the Doctor's wife, but I don't know if they quite achieve the balance that it needs. Unfortunately, we get quite a lot of scenes like this one where it reminds us what's happened before, and it's very similar to scenes we've already had. It's mainly there just to remind the audience that something important has happened. Nothing new is revealed here, there's no new information or interesting character development, it's just repeated exposition. The same goes for us seeing Amy's pregnancy scan on the monitor. It just feels a little shoehorned in at times, and it's annoying. A Good Man Goes to War throws us right back into the main series arc. After Amy gooped at the end of the Goop two-parter, it's all systems go as the Doctor and Rory fight to get Amy and her yet unborn child back.
As your unborn child.
There is so much I like in this episode. I adore the headless monks, they are simple yet very effective. I like the setting of Demon's Run. I think it handles all the character introductions incredibly well. This is probably the best the Paternoster gang ever are. There's humour involved with the characters, but due to the pacing of the episode and the threat and the tension constantly building, it doesn't allow too much time for the script to indulge in their comedic quirks. I think they get the balance incredibly well here. The Colonel Runaway speech is obviously brilliant, both in terms of writing and performance. I love it when the 11th Doctor gets to be darker and more menacing, and here it's pitched perfectly. We also finally get some answers into who the Eye Patch Lady is. Eye Patch Lady is the revival's first mysterious girl. For some reason, New Who seems to love a random woman popping up over the course of a series. It's honestly stupid how many times it's happened. Now, I think I'm right in saying that Eye Patch Lady is the first time they do the mysterious girl thing. I don't think it's the best of the random lady plots, but I like that we get an answer much sooner than you might be expecting as a viewer. With so much still going on in the arc, it's nice to get some answers early on. I like Strax's death, let's hope that doesn't get ruined later on. I love when the baby just bursts in Amy's arms, it's horrific and so well done. I adore that the Doctor doesn't remember Lorna. I've seen some people say it's because the Doctor hasn't met her yet, but I think that's crap because it just ruins any emotion from the scene. Him forgetting her makes it a character flaw, and flawed characters are good. I like it. All that being said, I don't adore this episode like a lot of people do. Unfortunately for me, it falls into that category of epic prophecies that never quite happen. River's whole bit where she talks about the Doctor rising higher than ever before and falling so much further sounds so fucking cool, and I don't think it's achieved. Like, yeah, he loses a bit, yeah, he's annoyed, but it doesn't live up to that prophecy. And of course, this episode ends with this reveal.
I'm your daughter.
This reveal is handled incredibly well. Yes, it's a little melodramatic, but fuck it, I think they earn it. Alex Kingston performs it perfectly. I love how the information is slowly drip-fed. I like that it takes a while for the penny to drop for Amy. It makes sense, she's fucking traumatized. And then, bang, credits. It makes you wait. Just a great mid-season cliffhanger. Unfortunately, its resolution never really lives up to its promise. I don't like mid-season breaks. I don't know whether it was Moffat or the BBC's idea, different reports say different things, but either way it annoys me. I just don't like it, and I hate that it's become an acceptable thing. But anyway, it is what it is. I don't think the break ruins my enjoyment of Let's Kill Hitler, because I don't think I was ever going to enjoy it anyway. This episode has everything I dislike about this era. I think it's another evil episode. It just feels mean. I feel like Moffat was angry when he wrote it. Rory feels out of character at points. The Doctor's fucking annoying. River will get to River. Firstly, I just think it's incredibly underwhelming after the cliffhanger of A Good Man Goes to War. Even if River is their baby, Amy and Rory should still be traumatised and heartbroken that their child was taken from them. There should be a raw sadness running throughout the episode, and it's just not there. I find Mel's incredibly annoying. I don't think the reveal of her being River works because we've never met her up to this point. It just feels very much written on the fly rather than cleverly plotted, what makes it feel very empty. Also, them bringing her up as friends is not a reason for them to be fine with their child being kidnapped. Like, I just find it all so messy. I also think this is why I'm slightly harsh on A Good Man Goes to War, because this episode just undermines it for me. Like, all that tension and horror they built up is suddenly shafted for a comedy episode. A comedy episode that I personally don't find very funny. Also, River is just infuriating in this episode. I honestly hate how she's written here. There's been a lot of conversations about the way Moffat writes women, and although I think a lot of that is blown out of proportion, here it's there. River wanting to weigh herself straight after regeneration is just bad. It's not funny, it doesn't feel characterful, it just feels like a way to get her out of the room for a minute so the main trio can make some quippy remarks. River's flirty nature and sexualization is in full force this episode. It's like she stepped out of a Carry On film. It's all very, ooh, matron. Moffat was horny and angry when he wrote this. Restrain yourself, Moffat. Also, this episode just highlights my issues with the River Song arc as a whole. I actually think the more important she becomes to the actual story kind of ruins the more subtle, sadder, characterful stuff that's there at the beginning. Her meeting the Doctor in the wrong order is kind of enough for me. I just want to see that relationship grow and form. The more heavy plots you give her gets in the way of that simple emotional stuff. Also, I wish she wasn't as timey-wimey. This series really makes it impossible to watch her stories in order because you'd have to watch some episodes 2 or 3 times because she's a child in one of them and then an adult and then she's a blah 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 blah. It's just too much. I think the simple idea of just being able to go back and watch their romance unfold from her point of view would have been really lovely, and it's a shame that that's kind of overcomplicated. Other things I struggle with this episode is the fact that it's a Doctor is going to die in a series that revolves around the Doctor is going to die. That's overkill. I find the Tesselector pretty boring, the floating bath bombs aren't threatening. Also, and this isn't a sentence I ever thought I was going to say, but I think Adolf is wasted. I know some people have a problem with how jokey in tone his scenes are. Personally, I don't mind that. It's the fact I don't find it funny that annoys me. If it was a laugh a second proper piss take of the man, I'd be all for it, but instead it feels so careful, which I just find disappointing. I just don't like this episode. I have no idea if people will agree with me, I don't really know how fans feel about this one, but personally I find it insufferable. It's just so underwhelming. Where's the heartache? Where's the heartache, Moffat?
Of course not, Click, on have kids!
Night Terrors is fine. I love the Peg Dolls. I fucking love the Peg Dolls. Honestly, you could ditch the kid and give me more creepy haunted dollhouse stuff and I would be happy. I wish this episode just allowed itself to be a full-on horror. I love the dolls. The rest is whatever, but I've moaned a lot this video and I don't want to be like that, so let's go into some big buckets of praise. For some reason, Series 6 suddenly decides to give us 2 back-to-back bangers. I adore these stories, and I think it's because both have a simple premise executed perfectly. The Girl Who Waited takes a sci-fi concept, perfectly moulds it into a family viewing experience, while allowing the characters to shine. In a series that is quite convoluted in its plot, with story being more prominent than character, it's lovely to have this sudden change in tone. I adore how we get to see a different side of Rory. Even though Amy is obviously incredibly important this episode, the script does a wonderful job at putting us into Rory's shoes. We feel for him and understand his dilemma and pain. Amy's written incredibly well this episode. She's bitter, cold, but still believable. There's just so much sadness and heartache running throughout the episode, and it feels incredibly real and raw without being soppy or feeling like it's desperately trying to pull at your heartstrings. Also, this is how you do the cheap one. There's been a lot of talk lately about budget and stuff, but honestly, a good story and a clever style will get you a long way. This episode is just mainly white. White walls, white floors. It's done for budget reasons, and yet it looks incredible. It creates such a sterile and cold atmosphere. It's all so perfect and clean and horrible at the same time. The handbots as well, so simple yet incredibly effective. I wish we got a bit more action with them. Monsters are unfortunately beginning to feel less important as the series goes on, but here the dialogue and the story are both so good that I can let it slide. Also, the episode may not offer much new in terms of Amy and Rory's relationship, but it does cement it. With so much of Series 5 being Amy flirting with the Doctor, and even in this series with the whole fell out of the sky nonsense, I like that we get to see them so in love with each other here. It tests their relationship without it being about jealousy or anything. It feels more grown up and interesting. Talking of grown up, the God Complex is another wonderful episode that tackles so many interesting themes, never dumbing them down for the audience. The set of the hotel looks amazing, very inspired by The Shining, and it works. I think the supporting cast are all really good. I think the Minotaur is amazing. I like all the little creepy stuff throughout, like the clown and the weird dummies. All of this just creates such a unique atmosphere for the episode, while still feeling very truthful to Doctor Who as a whole. The script is incredibly crafted. The dialogue feels so natural and grown up, but it never alienates the younger viewers. There's still so much for them to enjoy here. Rita is just a brilliant character. This is how you do representation. Rita is Muslim and her faith is treated with so much care and respect, which actually is incredibly impressive when you think about the themes of the episode as a whole. It could have easily come across that she was being punished for her faith, when in fact it's depicted like it's being stolen from her, which I just think is lovely. Also, the reason why this is such good representation is because it doesn't feel like the writers are patting themselves on the back for just putting a Muslim character in the show. Instead, she's a fully rounded character in the story. She's brave and smart and would have made for a perfect companion. I always like it when the show introduces someone who would have made a wonderful companion and then kills them off before they can become one. It just ups the feels of it all. My only gripe with the episode is I wish they allowed it to actually be Amy and Rory's farewell. Like, yeah, I know the River storyline and their baby hasn't been rounded up, but honestly, it never really is. This is just such a lovely exit for them, especially Amy, who has to give up her faith in the Doctor. It feels like she's growing up and saying goodbye to her imaginary friend, and that's just the perfect end to her arc, both in terms of plot and character development. I also just think it's an interesting end to Rory. Even after all this time, he doesn't have a faith, not even in the Doctor. And the Doctor giving them a house and a car and keeping them safe is just so sweet without it being overly sickly or twee. I just think The Girl Who Waited and the God Complex is such a lovely end to their journey, the first being all about their relationship and the second being their friendship with the Doctor. Personally, I don't think the Pond storyline ever hits these heights again, and instead they have to start forcing tension between them to try and keep it interesting. Asylum of the Daleks, we're getting to... Why is a bird fucking tweeting? I actually don't know if you could hear the tweeting in that, but a bird was tweeting outside, and I want to kill it. I just think a They Lived Happily Ever After ending suits the fairy tale vibe that surrounds the Ponds, and although it's not exactly a dramatic final exit, sometimes less is more. Okay, let's talk about closing time. There are two major rules in Doctor Who. The first is don't ever reveal the Doctor's name, and the second is don't keep the Cybermen in a fucking basement. Just what are you doing? If you promise me Cybermen in a shop, they better fucking crash through that shop. There better be some action and shit. Don't keep them in a basement. Don't chuck the Cybermen to one side so you can have a poorly executed sitcom episode where the majority of the jokes revolve around people thinking the Doctor and Craig are gay. Don't give me a fucking Cybermat and call that action. Don't keep writing babies talking. It's not funny. Don't have the Cybermen are defeated by the power of fucking love unless they're hooking them up to a sound system and blowing them up with Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Don't let Gareth Roberts write another Doctor Who episode, and for the love of God, don't, under any circumstances, write the Cybermen, some of Doctor Who's greatest villains that are calling out for dark, creepy body horror stuff, and keep them in a fucking basement. So I don't like closing time. The Wedding of River Song is an episode that confuses me. I've never known an episode where so much happens when actually at the same time nothing is happening. It's just 45 minutes of exposition. I rewatched it to write this video and I couldn't believe just how much of it is the show just outright explaining the plot to us. Even the cool ideas in the episode seem to go nowhere, all of time happening at once. Okay, cool, and yet it doesn't really offer anything exciting. There's some nice visuals at the beginning, but very quickly the episode has to cram so much into it that all of this is quickly shafted. The silence are completely underused, they spend the majority of the episode in some tanks, they don't actually break out of these tanks until the 30-minute mark and then are quickly killed off in the very next scene, never to appear again in the episode. Also, I think all the lore that's added to them throughout the series weakens them. The fact they're a religion is fine, whatever, but do I actually care? Not really. I just want them to be good, fun monsters, and unfortunately they're not in this. There's also a lot of rehashing plot beats that feel incredibly underwhelming. The universe gone wrong was executed much better in Series 5. The simplicity of the stars never existing is so much more whimsical and interesting than anything that's presented here. Amy once again not remembering who Rory is feels incredibly forced. I know she remembers him, just not what he looks like, but that's just worse. Also, we've done this plot beat literally last year, and it was so moving and gripping and ended on an amazing cliffhanger. Here it's kinda nothing. It's treated almost like a running joke throughout the episode. It has no heart. It feels like padding in an episode that definitely didn't need any padding out. It's far too cluttered already. We end the season on yet another wedding. Honestly, I don't feel anything during this scene. I don't know if it's because this episode is paced so badly, or if it's just because by this point I'm so sick of this arc that my patience has run out, but either way, I don't really care. And then of course we get the resolution to the Doctor dying at the lakeside, and my god, it's a cop-out. It is such a cop-out. It wasn't the Doctor all along, instead it was a robot thing that we met halfway through the series. Just, it's so boring. That's so bloody boring and feels so cheap and easy. It feels easy. They try to hide it with the whole I whispered my name thing, but actually he whispered look in my eye. They try and make it emotional and like a twist, but no, it being a robot feels like the most obvious and basic resolution, and just feels like we've been following this story for kinda no reason. And I said at the beginning of this video that this series breaks one of my main rules when it comes to writing and storytelling, and unfortunately it happens here. If you are writing a mystery, by the end all the clues you gave the audience need to make sense. At the end of the Wedding of River Song, we once again are shown what happened at the lakeside. We see the Doctor, or as we now know him to be, Robo-Doctor, getting shot. We see the companions panic, we see them have the Viking funeral, and most importantly, we see the regeneration energy. He's shot once, tries to change, but then is shot again before he can. That's pretty major. That's kind of huge. And I don't care how good that robot is at mimicking people, I don't believe for a second it can fake regeneration. And neither does the show, because it never explains how that happened. The Doctor dying at the beginning of the series acts like the main hook of the season. It wants you to come back each week to see what happens next. We know the Doctor won't actually die, so something clever is going to happen, but whatever the answer, it needs to follow and explain the setup. We saw regeneration energy. That regeneration energy needs to make sense. We could have misunderstood it or missed a bit of information that solves the riddle, but the regeneration needs to make sense. If that robot can somehow fake it, we need to be told that before the reveal. Otherwise, it's cheating. Because in episode 1, if they didn't do the regeneration, we might have guessed that that's not actually the Doctor, but we did see the regeneration. So it has to make sense, and it doesn't. It just doesn't. And for me, the end of this arc, this mystery that has been running throughout the entire season, feels pointless because we weren't given the correct clues to solve it. There's also just a lot of other stuff that feels unfinished. The mysterious girl never actually gets an ending because her death happens in a timeline that never existed, so she's just out there, she's just chilling, and then we never see her again, so she gets off very lightly. I don't think the series deals with Amy and Rory's loss or pain from losing their baby. They seem far too chill with the fact their daughter is now older than them. I do quite like everyone in the universe now thinking the Doctor's dead. That's quite a clever way to reset the show. However, again, we kind of reset the show last series, so it's not necessarily needed. Also, it kind of goes nowhere after this. And then we end on yet another prophecy about the Doctor dying on Trenzalore. And that's it. That's series 6. God, it's messy. I know this video makes it sound like I hate this series, and I don't. I think it has some great things. I think the fact they tried to weave a main arc through the entire series is great. I respect their ambition. I think the opening two-parter is fun, I like the Doctor's wife, I love the girl who waited in the God Complex, and I think a lot of the characters are written well. Also, when the monsters are actually used, they're really good. I respect Moffat's ambition in trying to tell such an epic story with a BBC tea time budget. There are things to admire throughout, however it's just so messy and it feels like a cop-out a lot of the time. I can see why people like this series, I understand why it's some people's favourite. If you're a massive fan of Moffat's writing style and quirks, it's all here, in fucking bucket loads. It is definitely the most Moffat ever Moffats, and for me that's why I have so many issues with it. I respect the ambition, I respect the effort that went into it, but it just has a lot of issues that will later plague future seasons. Doctor Who Series 7 may be one of the most disappointing series in the show in my opinion. This is going to be a long video. We've got the Pond's exit to discuss, Clara and the Impossible Girl arc, 3 Christmas specials, 3 of them, the 50th, the Paul McGann minisode and the Leaven's regeneration, plus Daleks, divorces and possibly the worst Cybermen episode in the show's history. This is Doctor Who Series 7. Too much of nothing. Okay, like I've said, this is going to be a long one, and I can't be bothered to spend too much time talking about this. The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe is pretty dull. It once again tries to take a classic book and meld it with a Doctor Who sci-fi whimsy, and yet falls pretty flat. There's some nice moments in it. I actually think the episode is at its strongest at the start. As soon as they get into the woodland world, it suddenly becomes very boring. Bill Bailey's character is nothing, the Royal Wood people look great but they don't do anything that interesting, and Cardinal Sin Time, how do you do an episode based on The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and don't give me a scary ice witch? Or like a massive Turkish delight that eats children? Something, just something. The final scene is lovely, it is simple and nice, but overall it is a pretty meh outing. I used to hate it, it's not as bad as I remembered, but it just exists. It's there, Claire Skinner's in it, Alexander Armstrong plays a stalker and Amy has a water pistol. The end. Series 7 as a whole really is a season with so much going on and yet constantly feels underwhelming, and I think personally that's captured from the very first episode. Asylum of the Daleks is just an odd 45 minutes of telly. It's got a breakneck pace, I do think the runtime flies by, however for once that's kinda a disadvantage. The episode is trying to explore so much and yet it feels like we never get to sit with anything long enough to really get invested. I think the initial concept and setup is actually pretty good. The Daleks, the Doctor's greatest foes, have to ask him for help. That's fun. I like it. I think the asylum setting itself is pretty neat. I know a lot of people think this would work better as a Cyberman episode, and although I do think that's a fair point, after a rewatch I don't think it would actually change that much other than the set dressing. I think for the most part it all looks great. There's some odd directing choices. This random snap cut to Matt Smith make this line feel incredibly cringy, more than I think it actually is.
Who do you think?
But on the whole, the weirdness of the place is captured perfectly. I love the bit where Amy sees the people dancing. It's got a Twin Peaks vibe to it, and it's just weird, and I like weird. But for me, however, there are 3 major things that annoy me in this episode, starting with the Daleks. Right, let's get this out of the way. I'm not a fan how Moffat writes the Daleks. Although he's a Doctor Who super fan, I get the feeling that the Daleks just don't excite him as much as the other iconic elements of the show. I mean, we are on his 3rd season as showrunner, and I don't think we've seen a Dalek exterminate a single person yet, and I think that's insane. That's like bringing back the Pating and putting him on a diet. No, that gremlin boy eats and the Daleks exterminate. It's just the fucking rules. The Daleks calling the Doctor the Predator feels odd because that's basically them calling themselves prey, which feels slightly out of character. And there's a cool idea to be had with the Dalek puppets, and yet I just don't like them. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they look a bit silly, but I never liked this addition to them. But that's all individual complaints. Overall, I think Moffat struggles to make the Daleks feel menacing. In the RTD era, there was a sense of danger and doom around them that's just missing here. It's an era where I become quite aware how silly they look. It's odd. There's some nice moments. I think the whole egg thing with Rory is good, but they just don't hold my attention. Also, this episode seems to back out of the ending of Series 6 immediately. At the end of the wedding of wedding is right. Wedding is with a W. Well done. At the end of the wedding of fuck's sake, no. At the end of the wedding of River Song, everyone in the universe thinks the Doctor's dead. It's almost like a soft reboot for the show, taking the main character down a peg. And I think there's a fun storyline to be explored there. And yet, the Daleks just know he's alive. I want to see what these killing machines would do if they thought their greatest enemy could no longer stop them. It just makes the ending of Series 6 feel a bit of a cop-out, even more than it already is, because it literally leads to nothing. And my last nitpick with the Daleks in this episode actually comes at the end. I don't like the resolution to this story. The Daleks not knowing who the Doctor is just feels pointless in my opinion. Most shows would fucking kill to have characters with this legacy. At this point it's nearly 50 years of the Doctor and the Daleks hating each other. There's a rich and detailed history between the two of them which makes them feel so important. Stripping them of that just so they can scream the name of the show at the end feels pointless. And ultimately turns out to be pointless as it never really comes up again. Also, the Doctor just leaves. He knows the Dalek camps, he knows this is the Parliament of the Daleks, and yet he just gets in the TARDIS and goes. And usually I'd be okay with that, but it feels underwhelming since the last time Eleven properly met the Daleks, he was furious that they got away. I just don't think there's a strong narrative this era with these villains, which is a shame. I don't think they need to be used as much as the RTD era, but I still want something richer from these iconic foes. Secondly, the writing of Oswin pisses me off. It's been said a lot of times that Moffat can't write women, and personally I think that's a massive sweeping statement that just isn't true. He does however have a tendency to give a lot of his female characters the same traits, and unfortunately these include flirty, a little horny, and sassy with a sitcom edge. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, there's nothing wrong with any of that, but due to it being quite constant, it begins to feel more like a trope than a well-rounded character. Oswin falls into this for me. She spends a lot of the story flirting with the Doctor and Rory. She's very quippy as if she's in a sitcom. I think that I Was Going Through a Phase line always feels more like a male fantasy than representation, and I want to make it clear, I don't find her character in this offensive, I just find it annoying. And I remember being quite worried at the time that this was going to be her full character when she becomes a companion. And lastly, my final negative of the story is the Amy and Rory subplot. I'm just going to say it, it doesn't work. I understand where it came from, I get what Moffat is trying to do. It reads to me that he realised that he didn't really do much about how affected they were of the plots of Series 6, and he's trying to fix that. But this is just insane. Firstly, breaking them off screen is a nutty choice, and yet I know Pond Life exists, but that just doesn't count, it feels odd. Also, they feel really out of character in these scenes. Like, cool, I know they're angry at each other, but I don't believe the Rory that we've been following would say something like this, even if he was angry.
Thought you were just pouting at a camera.
But the worst thing about it is that it goes nowhere. They break and make up in the same episode. It is the ultimate B-plot with little substance. And listen, I love a character plot. I love character dramas. I would probably eat this up if it was given the time to breathe, but it just isn't. This just isn't a plot to introduce when you only have 5 episodes left with these characters. And so far, I still think that they should have left at the end of the God Complex. Closing time, wedding a River Song, Doctor in the wardrobe, and this doesn't really add anything that's worth ruining that lovely send-off. I will say that this scene does fucking hit. The performances are great, they go for it, and even though I don't like the storyline, they sell it. I feel for them. I think with more of a build-up, this would have been a pretty perfect payoff. God, this is episode 1 and I'm already moaning a lot. Let's hope the next one's better. Oh, fuck. I get why some people would like dinosaurs on a spaceship. I mean, it's meant to be the fun one, and if it's your kind of humour, you'll like it. I can't stand it, to be honest with you. Firstly, great title, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, perfect. But due to budget reasons, we don't get nearly enough dinosaur action, and I feel like I've been lied to. I just want a good dinosaur episode, please. I know it would be expensive, but just find a way to do it, I'm begging you. It also definitely has one of Chibnall's faults at the heart of it, which is overloading a 45-minute story with far too many characters, leading to many of them feeling one-dimensional and slightly pointless. It's cluttered. This episode feels cluttered. The Mitchell and Webb robots deserve to be blown up. I don't find them funny. I feel the comedy. With the whole episode actually, you could feel how hard the humour is trying. It doesn't feel natural, it's all very forced. And I know that this is going to upset a lot of people, but I don't care for Brian. The man is a nuisance. I just don't get why you're suddenly introducing unseen family members in the last few episodes of The Ponds. And I don't get why it's Rory's dad. Surely just make it Amy's mum or dad, as we've already met them briefly. And why is the Doctor friends with a big game hunter? Solomon killing the dinosaur and the Doctor acting like it's an evil thing to do doesn't land, when one of his crew would literally do the same. I'm moaning again. I'm having a moan. Okay, positives. David Bradley kills it in this one. He's the best bit. He is given such a good dark performance, and you can tell he just loves playing the villain, and he's so good at it. The script just suddenly goes up in quality during his scenes. When it's allowed to get darker, it suddenly works. However, this does harm the tone of the overall episode, as the comedy just doesn't gel very well with these dark, sinister moments. I like that Doctor is so dark at the end of this one, but he's so fucking infuriating for the most part that it doesn't feel earned. This episode really has Eleven being written as that eccentric madman, and I don't feel I need to write it like that because Matt Smith is already bringing that with his performance. I love that it's a Silurian ship. That's a great bit of world building. The last shot of Brian having his lunch overlooking Earth is beautifully simple. That's lovely. So there's some good bits. It's okay. Yeah. Ugh. Next one. I actually really like this one. Yeah, some of the jokes don't land. Yeah, he talks fucking horse, but let's ignore that because I don't want to be seen as a moody online hater. I think this episode gets the tone completely right. The moral uncertainty of the Doctor is pitched perfectly, really allowing Matt Smith to shine in the lead role. Adrian Scarborough is brilliant as Jex, finding a lovely balance between his softer and darker tones. A lesser actor may have accidentally played this a bit pantomime-like or melodramatic, however he just grounds it. He's not a good man by any means, but he's more complicated than a generic snarling villain. The scenes between Amy and the Doctor is lovely. It's the first time in this series that I'm actually happy they're still here, allowing the show to explore the Doctor's fear of them leaving. However, they are still sidelined in this one. Rory doesn't get to do much at all, and it's odd because they're going soon. Surely you want to use them as much as possible, but never mind. The design of this episode is lovely, the cyborg looks fantastic. I used to find the ending a little bit of a letdown, as the Doctor and Jex's issues are left somewhat unresolved. However, after rewatching it, I really like it. I like that not everything is tied up in a neat bow by the end. It's just nice, it leaves the audience some questions to ponder. It actually is quite a grown-up episode, and yet manages to still make it family friendly with that distinctive charm that the show has. And you know, it's not a groundbreaking episode of Doctor Who, but it's bloody strong for an episode 3 and has such a distinctive style. It's trying something slightly different, and I love that. The Western setting is great. I like the egg ship, big egg, love the big egg. And it delivers on its promise. I get Doctor Who does the Western genre. Fantastic. This is why Dinosaurs on a Spaceship doesn't do it for me. The cool dinosaurs are barely in it, which feels like a broken promise. Which, to be fair, is one of the traps Power of the Free manages to avoid. It promises a boring premise and delivers on that in buckets. Okay, that was a bit harsh. There's actually some lovely stuff in this one. I think the concept is great. This ridiculously slow invasion is such a simple idea that could have made for a banging episode. I just think the episode sometimes struggles to find the excitement in the mundane, leading to some sitcom-style story beats that feel too similar to the comedy in episode 2. However, I do like Amy in this episode a lot. The scene where she talks to the Doctor is just lovely. The dialogue is so sharp and feels incredibly natural. I've seen some people say that they think Moffat wrote this scene, and I don't think so. It is very similar to Chibnall's writing style from his theatre plays. I've said this many times. Chris Chibnall, good writer, but a bad Doctor Who one. It isn't one of his strengths. I find Brian pretty fucking insufferable in this one. However, there's some nice moments. This scene is one of the best of the episode. Kate is also introduced really well. I really like the scientific side of UNIT that is portrayed in this episode. I just find the plot overall pretty weak. The aliens at the hospital are never explained. The actual plot overall is barely explained. And I know Steven Berkoff was a nightmare on set, so it's possible that has something to do with it. However, the rest of the episode still has its problems. There's just a lot of padding, barely a monster. You know me, I love a monster, and so far this series is lacking. We open with the Daleks, but then 3 episodes in a row without a proper monster doesn't feel great for the beginning of a series. Even more so when we're about to have another dreaded mid-season break. So the first half of the season has all been leading to this. After 2.5 series, the Ponds are exiting the TARDIS for good in one final adventure, featuring Riversong, the Weeping Angels, and New York. I think this episode is interesting. It is full of creativity, and although it has its issues, there is a lot to enjoy. Firstly, the entire cast are on top form. Matt Smith is excellent in this one, along with Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill. Alex Kingston is great. I like that River is dialed down a little bit in this. She feels less like a carry-on character, which is nice. I have absolutely no idea where in her timeline this takes place, but that's not necessarily a problem. I like the style of this one. This film noir take is really fun. I wish the directing matched this more. Sometimes it's a bit too bombastic, which doesn't quite fit the genre. I adore the cherubs. They're so creepy. I wish we got more of them. Rory goes through so much in this. He gets zapped, gets locked in with the creepy cherubs, gets zapped again, watches himself die, jumps off a roof and gets zapped again. That is insane. He must be fucking shattered. Although this episode is incredibly fast paced, it is at its strongest when it slows down a little, giving us those slower, more intimate scenes. The bit where the doctor demands River to get her wrist out without breaking it is brilliant, so is the reveal that she couldn't do it. The emotions in this one, it's really jam-packed with teary moments and they work. Moffat kinda pulls a Russell, the characterful emotional moments cover up a lot of the nonsense. And there is some nonsense. The Statue of Liberty being a weeping angel is ridiculous. I understand where the idea came from. It feels like a pub idea. You're sitting around with your mates, getting a bit piddled, talking about Doctor Who, someone's gonna suggest the Statue of Liberty is a weeping angel. 100%. The thing is, it doesn't work because you have to break literally all of the rules of the creature for them to be a creature. Firstly, how the fuck does it move? There's always someone looking at that thing. And secondly, if every picture of an angel is a weeping angel, there should be thousands of the fuckers walking about. It's one of the biggest things that annoys me in storytelling. It's similar to magic. I don't care what you do, but once you've established the rules of your story, you have to follow them. Otherwise, it feels like cheating. Also, I do think this is probably the least scary of the Angel episodes. I don't know why, but it doesn't have the same horror vibe that these creatures are crying out for. I'd love to see an Angel episode directed by a proper horror director. I want them to take this sound out every time they move. I want to see them do cool things with shadows and stuff. Like, there's so much you could do visually with them as well as sound. Sound design is such an important thing in horror genre, and it needs someone who's experienced in horror making. I've seen some fans say that the angels should be rested because there's not much you can do with them anymore, and I think that's insane. These monsters are brilliant. They just need someone with a vision to come in and give them a distinctive feel and identity. And lastly, let's talk about the plot holes. It's almost impressive how many plot holes are crammed into this 45-minute episode, so let's go through some of them. And I'm saying some because I know I'm going to miss a few. First one's a biggie. Why can't the Doctor see Amy and Rory again? Like, okay, he can't go back to New York, but they can travel somewhere else and he goes and picks them up. Or travel with River with a vortex manipulator. We know more than one person can use one, as seen in Sound of the Drums. And you could argue that because they read the names on the grave it's fixed, but that's very loose. I think this show struggles with fixed points at the best of times, but hanging your main character's exit on a very convoluted version of it feels wrong. Like, if they had actually died, yeah, that's fixed, I can believe that. But reading a gravestone? Nah, that's too flimsy for me. Call them! Stop fucking crying and give them a ring. The TARDIS phone reaches all the time and space. This is the issue. Their whole exit, which is actually written and performed incredibly well, falls apart as soon as you try to apply any logic to it. Because once you do, it makes the Doctor seem kind of stupid. It's hard to sympathise as an audience member when you can think of literally 5 ways that the main character could fix the situation. Also, it kind of makes the last 4 episodes feel a little bit pointless. Each episode prior to this one had a moment about the Ponds growing up, getting older and getting on with their lives. They're slowly becoming more and more distant from their time-travelling friend. It's the main plotline for these characters in this series, and yet this ending doesn't fit that. Friends becoming distant is such a raw, real-life scenario, so a timey-wimey, paradox-filled conclusion feels kind of out of place. I would have preferred the more simple, down-to-earth goodbye. I think it would have been sadder. They just say goodbye and the Doctor can't do anything about it, he just has to respect their wishes. Or alternatively, have the guts to kill them off outright. This ending does feel a little bit like having your cake and eating it. And then River turns the Doctor down, and that doesn't feel in character at all. This feels like Alex Kingston is too busy to do a whole series, so they have to come up with a reason why she doesn't stay with him. And I just don't think she turned him down. She loves this man. I don't know, it's messy. It's messy. But like I said, the emotional moments are done so well, it does cover a lot of these problems up when watching it. It's just when actually thinking about it and dissecting it for this video, I've noticed how flimsy the plot is. And then that's it. The credits roll and we have yet another insufferable mid-season break. God, I am moaning so much. I don't want to keep moaning. Let's hope the next one is, oh, cock. The Snowmen is better than The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, but it still has its issues. Unfortunately for Moffat, he knocked it out of the park with his first Christmas special that all his others failed to live up to that amazingly romantic and fantastical tale. Here we do get some of that magic. The Doctor living alone on a cloud is a lovely visual with that fairy tale-like wonder that we've come to expect from the Smith years. Victoria Clara is great, Jenna Coleman has such a great energy in this one, and thankfully she is given a much better script and character than she had in Asylum of the Daleks. The snowmen themselves look a bit silly, but they're quite fun. They've got a charm to them, and I applaud Steven Moffat for trying to make snowmen scary. It doesn't quite work the whole way, but that's okay. Murray Gold's soundtrack is beautiful in this one. It looks really good. I know people like the tweed, but I fucking love the Doctor's new look. I'm not a massive fan of this TARDIS. It's basically the Capaldi TARDIS, but in the Capaldi years, they light it so much better. Like, it's still good, it's a good design, but they don't quite find the tone of it yet, and they do with Capaldi. Vastra, Jenny and Strax are in this one. I think these characters are like Marmite. You either love them or hate them. I think they're fine. Well, that's not Marmite then, is it? Talking nonsense. I'm wasting everyone's time. I think they're fine. I think sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. The comedy doesn't always land. I don't understand why Strax is back. He died. He fucking died. Like, one little minisode saying he was actually asleep is not funny enough to undermine his death. Actually, let's talk about that. People say that Moffat likes killing off characters, and I'm sorry, that's nonsense. That's just blatantly not true. His first episode, we get this line.
Just this once. Everybody lives.
And then in the library one, we get this.
Everybody lives.
And then we haven't had the Daleks exterminate anyone yet. He brings Strax back. The Ponds kinda die, but not really. Later in the series, he kills off Jenny and then brings her back within 10 minutes. We'll talk about the whole Clara thing in Series 9, Bill in Series 10, Osgood dies, but then not really Osgood. I feel like a lot of side characters who die in this era come back by the end. He brings the fucking Brigadier back, restrain yourself, Moffat. Rory, fucking how many times does Rory die? Delirium? What's his name? The blue guy. Yes, I know he's a head in the box, but I think it fits. Rory a few more times for good measure. He brings the Time Lords back. Irene Adler, different show, but I'm counting it. And then other writers within the era too. Why do these guys come back? He was eaten by a wall. These guys, you died. We watched you die. No one's allowed to rest in this era. They never find peace. Danny Pink. Danny Pink stays dead. He's touch and go for a minute, he's given many options to come back to life, but ultimately, he stays dead. Danny Pink. So yeah, Strax is back. The gang are actually fine in this one. It's Christmas. As long as you've got a drink in your hand and a belly full of turkey, they're manageable. Ian McKellen and Richard E. Grant are both great, but they are underused. I'd love to have seen more of them both just camping it up a bit. I love the Ice Lady. We didn't get a scary Ice Witch in the last Christmas special, so he's making up for it here. Thank you, Moffat. I adore that Victoria Clara plummets to the ground and yet still looks bloody gorgeous afterwards. Literally not a scratch. I think that's hilarious. But for me, the worst part of the episode, and I don't know if this is controversial, but it's actually the pond scene. I think Moffat at times writes some beautiful poetic stuff for Doctor Who. However, sometimes you feel like it's trying too hard. I do not believe if you had one word to convince someone to help you, you would have picked the word pond. That doesn't work. Pond, not children, not Christmas, not something to pull on your heartstrings. Nope, pond. That's just a word. It could have been anything.
I gave her the one-word test.
What did she say?
Blancmange. Literally the same thing. Then Victoria Clara dies, the Doctor's ecstatic about it, and he runs off to solve the mystery of the impossible girl. I don't know, it's fine, it just doesn't grip me. There's not enough big spoon people. Fuck yeah, now we're talking. I love the spoonheads, they're ridiculous, they don't do anything but just look at them. That's hilarious. The Bells of St. John is an insane episode. It starts with the Doctor as a monk, he saves a plane from crashing, dries up the shard, Celia Imrie is actually an 8-year-old, the villains are spoons, what was Moffat drinking and where the hell do I get some? I think Stephen the Moffat gave himself a difficult challenge. He basically has to introduce his new companion for the 3rd time. That is not easy and honestly a challenge that most writers would never give themselves, but Moffat is both Scottish and insane. Actually, this is a really good point for a tangent. I have ADHD, a tangent is my drug. I think it's obvious from my constant moaning that I'm not a massive fan of this series. However, if you listen to Moffat in interviews, I get the impression neither is he. I think he had a tough time on this one behind the scenes, and I do want to give some credit where it's due. He tried new things this series. From the constant changing opening titles in the first part of the season to trying to give each episode its own kind of genre and feel. Honestly, what lets this down is they don't go hard enough on the genre pieces. Shit, I'm moaning again. The fact a main companion leaves halfway through the series, the high concept plots, the shifting tones, the bold choices, this isn't a man running on autopilot. He never really does, he always pushes the show in new directions and you can really feel the love he has for it. You can feel it in the Bells of St. John. It's not an episode I particularly like, but there's moments of greatness there. I adore the whole hacking into people's emotions. That's just wonderfully dark. I think one of my biggest issues is that overall it just feels a bit too Sherlocky for my taste, and I think 11 is becoming a caricature of himself, and this continues throughout the rest of the series. But there's still some nice stuff. Clara is written better here. We do get some stupid lines like the Snogbox bit, but for the most part she's pretty fun, definitely elevated by Jenna Coleman's performance. Her and Matt Smith just have a wonderful chemistry together. It's incredibly natural, and that's why I kinda hate it when the writing tries to force it. The young love romance they're going for feels unnecessary, especially as they barely commit to it. I think just let their performances speak for themselves, it would feel more down to earth and real. Also, Clara being such a mystery kind of strips her from any real character growth. She feels pretty fully formed in this series, she doesn't really change much as that's not her main role. Instead, she's the question mark driving the story arc forward. It's a shame, I never really liked the Impossible Girl thing. I think Jenna Coleman is so good that she doesn't need this mysterious storyline hanging over her. We'll get into this in the next video, but I much prefer Clara in Series 8 than Series 7, for many reasons. Unfortunately, the rest of the series does kinda plod along. It's just got an odd feeling to it. It feels different, very separate from the first half of the season. They even changed the opening titles, and although I love these ones, I think they look fucking great. I would prefer the series to feel consistent. This doesn't feel like the same series of the show. It's messy. We're back to being messy. The Rings of Akatun is okay, the music is lovely, but the plot's not that gripping. Also, no good monster, which is a shame as there wasn't really much of a monster in the last episode either. I like the big speech at the end, mainly because of Smith's performance, but I think the whole segment goes on far too long, what with Clara and her bloody leaf. It's just a bit too soppy for my taste. Big sun god being defeated by a leaf doesn't work for me. Why can't this show do good resolutions for evil gods? I think Cold War had all the right ideas on paper. Base Under Siege, Ice Warriors, a stacked cast, kind of insane, and yet it kind of falls flat. We spend too much time with this bloke singing Hungry Like the Wolf rather than the fun alien action, which is a shame. I really like that it breaks out of its suit. It wasn't something I was expecting when I first watched it, and I think the director does a great job at keeping the creature obscured most of the time. Then this happens. Bad. Bad. Restrain yourself, Gatus. What were you thinking? Fear of the unknown is one of the most important aspects when it comes to horror, and they just abandon it right at the last second for no reason. It looks like a boiled tortoise. I will say the pacing is really decent in this one, and when it works, it works. It just stumbles a lot throughout. I think the setting is good, the mood it creates, it's very dark, cold and claustrophobic. I wish the humour had been cut. I wish this show would sometimes be brave enough to do a serious, scary one without feeling the need to write quippy dialogue. Also, the ending's a bit crap. He just leaves. That's meh.
I gave her the one-word test.
What did she say?
Meh. Literally the same thing. Okay, we're getting through it. Come on, John, for the glass vase. That's a reference no one's gonna get. That's from the British game show Bullseye, and I say it all the time. Moving on. Hyde. Hyde is an episode that could have been brilliant, and I think it chickens out of it. Haunted house, creepy haunted house, that should slap. But we leave the house so many times. I want to stay in the house. I want to feel encased by this overwhelming creepy atmosphere, but it keeps breaking it constantly. Also, once again, we don't need the quips. Have faith in your story. I don't like the monsters. I don't like that they're misunderstood lovers. I think visually this episode's good. I just wish they fully went for the haunted house gothic horror genre. There's something wrong when the best bit of a ghost episode is a romance between two characters we don't know and will never meet again. Like, yeah, the subplot should be good, otherwise what's the point in it being there, but the best bit? Kinda ridiculous. And it's at this point I begin to realise I don't feel connected to the Doctor and Clara's relationship. I don't quite believe it. There's moments of gold, the bit where she talks about being a ghost is lovely. It's like whenever they cut out the fluff and the flirty banter, it suddenly works. I don't know, this episode just isn't for me, which is a shame because this one should be my shit. I love ghost stories, I love gothic horror, and yet it's not one. Let's hope the next episode is a bit, oh, bollocks. What happened this series? Dear God. Okay, the positives. I like the concept. The concept is strong. Matt Smith is pretty good in this one when the script allows him to be serious. I think Clara's pretty strong in this one too. I actually like the zombie things. I think that's fun. It is a shame that this is the cheap one. They literally keep using this blurry effect to try to hide the budget. And it's funny because this is a concept that should not be the cheap one. This one needs a budget. That being said, the cheapness is quite charming at times. There's a classic Who feel to it at points, with everyone running down similar looking corridors. It's mainly held back by the 3 supporting characters. I don't know what happened here, but it's just not good. I try not to comment on people's acting a lot as I'm an actor myself, but Christ, I'm sorry, but some dreadful line reads in this one just takes me out of the story every time. Also, why did they trick their brother into thinking he was a robot? That's insane, and kinda adds nothing to the story being told. It doesn't feel thematically relevant, and it doesn't get resolved. Like, time resets, so they just never tell him? He's kind of a bit nicer at the end, but not really. That's insane. This series is insane. Okay. I like the Crimson Horror. Maybe by this point I'm just worn down, but I do. I like it. I think it's fun. It's not brilliant. The Doctor stuff with Jenny's fucking awful, but the actual plot is quite neat, if a little bit silly. I adore Diana Rigg in this one. She's just given such a camp villainous performance that suits the style of the episode. I adore Mr. Sweet. He looks great. Like, it's not a scary one, but I don't think it's meant to be at all. It's just a camp one with a gothic flair. The gang are annoying at times, but I don't mind them as much in this one. I think it looks pretty good. I adore Rachel Sterling in this, getting to watch her spar with her mum on the screen. That's good fun. There's such an underlying sadness running throughout, and although all the emotional beats aren't always hit, I like it. I would probably go as far to say that this is my second favourite episode of Series 7. That's insane. People are going to hate me after that. I'm sorry. I'm kind of not though. I think it's fun. It does what it sets out to do, which most of the episodes this series don't. Is it a groundbreaking piece of telly? No, of course not. It's got this fucker in it. But I do enjoy it as a bit of turn your brain off viewing and just go with the ride. Yeah, I do. Please don't unsubscribe. Right, let's not beat round the bush. This is dreadful. I know I went on my closing time rant in the last video, however I think this one is slightly worse due to just how poorly the Cybermen are imagined. Giving them the ability to go zooming, to spin their heads round like a metal exorcist, having them take their hands off and becoming the Thing from Addams Family just loses everything that makes these villains so compelling. The Cybermen are best at their most simple. Simple doesn't equal bad. Simple storytelling can sometimes be the most effective. Here, everything is thrown into the mix, resulting in an incredibly messy tale that thinks it's a lot scarier than it is. Where's the tension, the threat, the danger, and most importantly, why should I care? I don't feel for the characters or the situation, what makes everything feel kind of flat. There's some good ideas here, the setting is great, the Cybermites are cool, but it's just there. The kids, God, the kids. Okay, child actors are bad at the best of times, but dear God. Like, I don't want to be mean, but they take me out of it every time they speak. They're just not very good, and the lines they are given doesn't help. They're annoying characters from the off. This whole series suffers when it comes to them because the show doesn't know what to do with them. They're just there so Clara has a job. I like Warwick Davis in this one, I think he's quite good in the role. Jason Watkins is massively underused. He is such a great actor and is wasted in this story. He does a bit at the beginning, but then spends most of the runtime just stood in the corner. And of course, we have Matt Smith playing both the Doctor and Mr. Clever. And I want to make it clear that my criticisms for this aren't to do with his performance. I think he does the best he can with what he's given. But it's the writing that just holds this back from the off. This is the Cybermen we're talking about, the emotionless, cold, foreboding villains that can't be stopped. The whole thing is about stripping people from their feelings and what makes them human. So this doesn't work. It could if the dialogue was blunt, matter of fact, scary because it's so normal, that would be great. Definitely as Matt Smith's Doctor is already energetic, giving him a villain who barely shows anything could be really fun. But he shouldn't be saying stuff like a showman, all the boys and girls stuff, spinning around. It doesn't feel anything like the Cybermen. They're not Cybermen here, they're just robots that look like Iron Man. Where's the horror? Why is this the penultimate episode of the season? Why does it end with this line?
Mystery wrapped in an enigma, squeezed into a skirt that's just a little bit too tight.
What the fuck? Like, that's so bad. Like, come on, how did that make it past the writing, the filming, the editing, and make it to TV? Surely someone should have stopped that from happening. What a dreadful ending to lead into the final. But here we are. Finally, we're at the final episode of the season. It has all been building to this. I don't know what fans think of this one. There's some good stuff here, I want to say that first. There are some lovely bits, however a lot of great moments either get undercut or aren't given the proper time to develop. Let's start with the concept. If you've watched my Series 6 video, and you should, it's a work of art, then you may know where this is going. I don't like the Doctor dying in Series 6 because we know he's going to be fine, he's not actually going to die, and it's kind of the same here. We know whatever happens, whatever mad shenanigans are thrown our way, the Doctor's name is not going to be revealed. The question, Doctor Who, will remain unanswered, so this whole name thing doesn't do anything for me, because it's a pointless tease. I know the outcome before you've even risen the stakes. And it's almost a double whammy, because I know the Doctor isn't going to die, so going to his resting place on Trenzalore doesn't do anything for me either. And I know the Doctor doesn't have any more regenerations left, so okay, maybe it does work on a story-like basis, but then don't do the exact same thing the series prior. 2 back-to-back Doctor dying arcs seems silly. I think the first half of this episode is much stronger than the second. I think the opening titles are a fun tease, the meeting of the Paternoster gang, Clara and River, is great. I think overall this episode looks really good. Series 7 looks quite cheap at times, however this one's cool, there's a clear aesthetic running through it. Again, Matt Smith is brilliant in this one. I think this scene in particular is beautifully played, and so is the whole they were talking about my grave reveal. I quite like that. I think that's quite a clever thing without being too convoluted. It's simple but smart. I can't tell you why, but I adore the Whispermen. I know they don't do anything, but they just look so cool. They're wasted and it's a shame because it's one of the best villain designs of the series. I honestly would love to bring these guys back. I'd cut the rhyming stuff, I don't know why they're constantly dropping poems, but I'd bring them back and make them the star. I always thought you could do quite a fun thing about intrusive thoughts with them, that voice whispering in your ear. I don't know, there's something there, but I like them. River is fine in this one, not her most interesting appearance, but she serves the story well. I find this scene pretty touching. It makes no damn sense, he shouldn't be able to see her at all, but whatever. The emotion hides the flaws. The best moment for me is the moment when Jenny dies.
I think I've been murdered.
That is a brilliant last line for a character. It's tense, it is creepy, it's sad, and it is such a shame that it's undone in like 10 minutes. And I don't understand why. Jenny only appears in one more episode after this. Just kill her off. This moment is golden. It sets the villains up as dangerous. But her suddenly being brought back to life by the click of a button takes away most, if not all, of their threat. You can't have a group of monsters that can stop people's hearts while a character has a device that restarts hearts. This moment where they attack the group kind of means nothing because we know Strax has a magical reset button. It's not even plot armor at this point, it's just armor for no good reason. And it's kind of made even more silly that Jenny doesn't do anything else in the story, she just disappears again, kill her off! Obviously the main thing this episode gives us is a resolution to the Impossible Girl arc. I'm quite glad we get it so soon, mainly because I'm not a fan of the storyline to begin with. The resolution is fine, I don't love it, but I was probably never going to because it didn't grip me from the off. It makes sense, I'll give it that. There's a few sloppy lines surrounding it, I wish you'd stop going on about soufflés. Just the issue for me again is that the villain didn't feel dramatic or deadly enough for me to find Clara's sacrifice emotional. I just don't understand the Great Intelligence motives. The 3 stories he's appeared in this series feel very disjointed. I don't know what his grand scheme is. The Doctor doesn't even know he was behind the Spoonheads, and it doesn't matter. And I know he's a classic villain, but that's not enough. I wish he felt more like the big bad of the season. That's definitely what they want him to be, but it never really comes together. Also, he should have been in part 1 of the series. Series 7 really does feel like 2 seasons in one. It's very, very disjointed. And finally, we have the ending, the big reveal. The bits leading up to this moment don't really make any sense. The episode constantly breaks its own rules. We're told countless times that if Clara steps into the time stream, she will die. She doesn't, and we don't really know how. The fucking crusty leaf is back, and then the Doctor turns up and she's fine. It's also never shown to us how they get out of there. The 50 just opens like nothing happened. But of course, the main talking point is the John Hurt cliffhanger, and it's good. Like, that hits. Simple, performed really nicely. God, his voice was amazing. That is an actor's voice. I just think this is a perfect cliffhanger leading into the 50th celebrations. Right, I can't explain to you how excited I was for the 50th as a kid. Honestly, I was insufferable. Just a horrible, cringy 13-year-old who needed a haircut and some Valium. The teasers and the trailers were great, all the interviews just built up this wonderful buzz. It felt like a moment. I didn't see it in the cinema because I didn't want anyone talking or slurping or being taken ill during it. This was for me. Night of the Doctor is a minisode leading into the 50th anniversary. Now, I haven't covered any of the other minisodes because honestly, who gives a shit? But this one feels important, so here we are. I think this is actually really well written. Paul McGann is just great as the Doctor. It's such a shame we haven't got more of him on screen, but it's lovely we got this. It's intriguing, well paced, it doesn't overstay its welcome, it's good, it's just really good. If I had one little gripe, well not even a gripe, just a wish, a preference, it's just I wish we never saw McGann regenerate. It would mean we wouldn't get this minisode, but there's something fun about never seeing it. It means you can bring the 8th Doctor back whenever and never have to explain why he looks older. Perhaps he just lived a long time. It's just a preference, some will disagree. I do hope we get more of the 8th Doctor on screen at some point in the future. Not yet, we need a few seasons with no callbacks and stuff, but one day. Here's hoping. Okay, Day of the Doctor. I don't have tons to say about this one, to be honest. It's never been one of my favourite episodes, but I understand why so many love it. It's big, it's a celebration, it balances its story with fan service really well, and just as a piece of telly, it's a massive achievement. From what we know, Series 7 was apparently a mess behind the scenes, so the fact this came out like it did is pretty amazing. I like the concept of the War Doctor, I think it's handled pretty well. A surprise unknown Doctor was always going to be done at some point, and honestly a big 50th anniversary really is the place to do this storyline. I wish this was it. Personally, it's a one and done for me, but we'll get onto that during the Chibnall videos. John Hurt is brilliant in this role. He brings so much gravitas and richness to it. I wish he had less jokes. Once again, I think sometimes it's okay to play something completely serious and straight, especially when there's so many other characters that can bring the comic relief. Like, I don't need all the sand shoe stuff. Let this man be a mourning, bitter, haunted individual, a side of the Doctor we've never seen before, because when we get it, it works. This scene here may be the best of the episode. It just works, the dialogue just sings, and it really is nice to see the different interpretations of the same character play off each other. The way they incorporate Billie Piper into the plot is kinda genius. It allows her to be part of the celebrations without treading on any of her storylines. Just good stuff, and she plays it so well, and I love that Moffat held back. We never get a scene between her and David Tennant. He restrained himself, he fucking did it. Well done, mate. I will say that I think the Time War stuff is slightly underwhelming. The lore of this battle has been built up so well throughout the revival that I think seeing it was always going to be slightly disappointing. We were promised the Nightmare Child, the biggest war of all the time and space, and it looks like any other Dalek invasion, which is a shame. Personally, the Zygon subplot isn't needed. There's enough story to mine from the Time War and the destruction of Gallifrey, and I always feel like the pacing comes to a bit of a halt whenever we go to the Black Archive. The Zygons do look great though, a wonderful design. Also, weird note, please tell me if I'm being stupid, but do these scenes look cheap to anyone else? I don't know why, but it just looks low budget. Maybe it's the blocking or the lighting, I don't know, I've always thought it. David Tennant slips back into the role as the 10th Doctor effortlessly. His suit is too tight, his hair is ridiculous, but he still pulls it off. What a trooper. And of course, the biggest moment of the 50th is the return of Gallifrey. I think Moffat kinda pulled off the impossible. He manages to bring the Time Lords back without upsetting or ruining any of the RTD era and the last of the Time Lords arc. I know some people would have been upset about it, but I think it works. Gallifrey was always going to return one day, and if not here, a showrunner may have just come on board and decided to bring it back without any explanation. So the fact we got an in-depth story about it that explores the Doctor's guilt and remorse is great, both for fans but also for the show. It cements the Last of the Time Lord arc as one of the greatest storylines in Doctor Who history and should never, ever be done again. Ever. Restrain yourself, Russell. Other highlights include the Tom Baker cameo. The All 13 scene is great. Look at those eyes. Those are the eyes of a man who knows he's a god. Clara is really good in this one. Her little moments with the War Doctor are brilliant. Honestly, as soon as she's free from the Impossible Girl story, she comes alive. I'm so excited to talk about her in the Capaldi videos. And then it ends. A great celebration of the show, which sometimes is golden and other times a little boring. People hate me for that. Definitely as I praise Crimson Horror. Fuck me, the comment section is going to be a minefield. Okay, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you. And secondly...
Are you okay? I hope so.
It's been a long one. I'm knackered. If you're enjoying this video, please do leave a little like and a subscribe. It can be your good deed of the day. But here we go. The 11th Doctor's final episode.
I gave her the one-word test.
What did she say?
Fanny. Okay, that's the last one, I promise. I'm done. I've killed the joke. I've said Fanny now. I've gone too far. I have done so much moaning in this video, so I'm going to get that out of the way so we can end on a high note. Because although there are faults in this episode has some absolute gold. Unfortunately, this episode gives us some ultimate restrain yourself Moffat stuff. The whole naked segment is dreadful and I don't like Tasha. She's a charity shop river song and the flirting feels so out of place, especially when they're still dancing around the whole Doctor and Clara lovey-dovey stuff. The episode has to wrap up so much stuff that sometimes it buckles under the weight. It's not awful, Moffat actually handles the exposition incredibly well. It's just a shame that so much of it has to be explained in an episode that is at its strongest when it's simple. And finally, surprise Crack is back. I don't like that it returns. I always thought of the Crack as Amy's storyline, not the 11th, even though it's caused by his TARDIS. It just fits that girl who waited fairy tale vibe with the ponds. And again, its return is handled really well, it just doesn't fit really. Also, the crack being what the Doctor saw in the hotel room is ridiculous. That should never ever have been revealed. But all that being said, the main concept of the Doctor staying in one town to grow old as he protects it is fucking magical. All these moments are basically perfect, from the writing, the performance and the directing. Everything just comes together to tell a magical yet bittersweet Christmas story. It's the little details as well. The true field around the town is lovely. The fact that Dr. Men's toys makes him like a Santa figure, and that's great. The makeup is wonderful, and Smith's performance may be one of his best. He excels here. He has to balance so many different things, playful, sad, angry, lonely, all of it, and yet he never phones it in. It feels real and raw, and I adore it. Handles is a great character, nearly all of the humour lands, and his death scene may be one of the best. Moffat finally killed someone off and didn't bring him back. Everything about this moment works. It is subtle and beautiful in its simplicity. Clara is wonderful in this one, especially in the second half of the episode as she watches the Doctor grow old. This episode looks beautiful, and the way the Doctor gets a new set of regenerations is done really well too. Exposition that doesn't feel convoluted or forced. There's things I could moan about and stuff, but just a feeling, the tone is just rich. I like it. I'm not moaning anymore. I like it. Personally, I feel like this scene should have been Levin's only regeneration. Him returning to his young state to say another goodbye feels like having your cake and eating it. I know I'm moaning again. Shut up. I know they probably wanted to give Matt Smith a proper send-off, but I think the majority of this episode does that already. His last words to Clara being about saving her one last time is kind of perfect. That's the Doctor. That's magical and simple. Also, I do find the "when the Doctor was me" stuff far too soppy. And before anyone comments, we know they were both bald here. They were both bald. They're wearing wigs. We know. We fucking know. Restrain yourself, viewer. And then, with a drop of his dicky bow, the 11th Doctor leaves us and Peter Capaldi hates his kidneys. And that's it. That's season 7. Christ alive, that was a lot. It's messy, it's bloody messy, and long. It's long. Remember when we started this with the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe? That was years ago. Series 7 is definitely weak. It's crammed full of great ideas, but most are never properly realised. It feels like it's running out of steam a lot of the time, and even though they pull off the 50th and the regeneration, the build-up feels like padding. I don't know, there's still a lot of love and hard work that's gone into it, but I think you can feel Moffat burning out, juggling both Doctor Who and Sherlock. It's just a weak series, but with some strong standout scenes. Next time we'll be doing a little less moaning as we dive into Series 8. We'll explore the 12th Doctor's arc, Clara's new storyline, the ups and downs of Danny Pink, evil Mary Poppins, and possibly the funniest resolution in the show's history.